Hello, ladies and gentlemen. I am Dr. Claudia Albers, Planet X researcher and professional physicist. And today I'd like to bring to you another one of my articles. This one is entitled Rejuvenated Stellar Cores in the Inner Solar System. Now in Figure 1, which is a stereo AHI1 image from March 23, 2017, we see several objects that are labeled as Mercury, Venus, Earth, and Jupiter. Now, the vertical line associated with Earth, and this vertical line is due to the fact that the planets are bright and overwhelm the detector to a certain extent, so that it produces this vertical line associated with each of the bright objects in the image. And then to the left of Earth, we see another line, a vertical line that does not seem to have any bright object associated with it. And we see a green, indicated by the green arrow, this dark region just to the left of Earth. And I think this is possibly associated to an object that was colored in or covered over, possibly an object that's close to the Earth. Now, in the next image, we see this is an image from November 11, 2016, and we see the same thing. This is Earth, and we see a dark shadow that seems just to the left and a little behind Earth, in relation to the detector, which is stereo A, and we see this dark line as if there is a line associated with that object, possibly a bright line, but it may have been blacked out for some reason. And then in Figure 3, we see that this vertical line to the left of the Earth's vertical line has moved further to the left than it was in Figure 1, and this suggests that the object associated with it moved a little bit away from the Earth. But the fact that it's been there for quite a while, since November, suggests that, first of all, it's an object that must be very close to Earth, and it must have an orbit that's very close to Earth's orbit, because if it wasn't, the orbit was not close, then they would move apart. And the fact that they don't seem to be moving apart suggests that there's an object close to the Earth, almost shadowing the Earth, possibly in a very, very close orbit around the Sun, but close to the Earth's orbit. Now in the next image, this one is from March 25th to 2017, and here the yellow arrow indicates a dark shadow to the left of Earth. Again, it looks even larger here, so there is a line associated with it. So there does seem to be an object that should be bright enough to produce a line that should overwhelm the camera, and yet has, for some reason, the image seems to have been manipulated, so it doesn't appear as it would have otherwise. We also see this is the object that's labeled Jupiter. It seems to have plasma discharges emanating from it, these little lines that seem to come from the object. And then we see this round outline. It seems to be covered by this CME coming from the Sun over here, and possibly something else coming from the Sun, but that has been covered over or brush stroked over, so we're not quite clear what this is, but it does seem to be behind these ejections coming from the Sun, so the object cannot be too close to the detector, and therefore must be an extremely large object. And then in this image, we see the object labeled as Jupiter having very strange plasma ejections, something that a planet cannot possibly have. We see these plasma loop ejections. We see the object sometimes growing in size. I call this a nova outburst. White dwarfs have nova outbursts where they suddenly become extremely bright and then they go back to the original size and brightness. And the rejuvenated stellar cores in the inner solar system are basically white dwarfs that have cooled down to the point that they're no longer able to emit visible light. So that's why I started out calling them brown dwarf stars. Nowadays, I call them stellar cores because when they arrive in the solar system, they are basically, and most of them are basically a solid, extremely dense core of what was once a main sequence star with just a little bit of ionizing material clinging to the surface, which the star then boils into gaseous plasma or its gaseous atmosphere, like the sun's corona. We see a jet-like plasma ejection here. This is another one of the ejections that these objects seem to be capable of having. Now, the fact that they have plasma ejections shows that they cannot be planets. They have to have hot glowing plasma, and then the plasma would spiral along these magnetic field lines. Obviously the object has a very high magnetic field in order to produce these type of magnetic field lines, and it must have glowing hot plasma. It must be a star, and then the plasma spirals along the magnetic field lines and makes the plasma loop visible. So obviously this is not Jupiter. This has to be a rejuvenated stellar core in the inner solar, possibly in the inner solar system. The objects are just labeled, I think, to hide the fact that they are there. Now, in this image, we are looking at the object that is labeled Venus, and we can see this kind of a little ejection on the right of the object. It's very small here. It's a little larger there. It's even larger there and even larger there. And it actually looks like it's very small here because it's turned away from the detector. And here it's turned, the object has turned, so this ejection is a little bit more visible, and it turns further towards the detector as we go through the images, and this suggests that this object is rotating. But now Venus takes 116 days to complete one revolution, and these images are only 2 hours apart, so it is impossible that this rotating object is possibly Venus. It is, again, I think, another one of these rejuvenated stellar cores in the inner solar system. And again, we see these are SREM images, and in the SREM images, what is detected is particles, ionized particles, and so we cannot have lens flares. They are not visible images. And as you can see, we still have the circular outline indicating a very large object present in this image. And it does seem to be behind this CME material coming from the sun. So it's not very close to the camera. It must be a very large object. Next, we have some more SREM images. These are from March 23rd, 2017. And here it looks like there is some sort of cloud coming off one of the objects, this particular object here. And I think this is, again, the object labeled as Jupiter. And therefore, this plasma material coming off it would indicate that it is having a CME coronal mass ejection. So again, a star coronal, a stellar core, rejuvenated stellar core, having a coronal mass ejection. And we see another object here. It's not present in these first two images, but in these two, we see an object having a jet plasma ejection. Again, it cannot be a planet. Planets cannot have these types of jet ejections. Brown dwarfs are known to have these, or brown dwarf stars. I believe they are actually usually the same thing. So this means that the objects labeled as Venus and labeled as Jupiter have to be stars. And there has to be another star just off the image on the right there. So this means that in these images we have 3 rejuvenated stellar cores or brown dwarf stars, and these must be in close proximity to the sun. This means they've been in the sun's corona long enough to have gained electric potential energy, and protons, I should have said plasma, in enough quantity to start perhaps some fusion reactions and to emit light. And these are therefore rejuvenated stellar cores. And once these stars are able to do that, they may be able to then blow their clouds of ionized gas away, because when they enter the solar system they have a lot of debris and clouds of gas surrounding them. And this material goes into the sun. They actually exchange it with the sun, and because they are able to boil off some of the ionizing envelope material, just like any star seems to be able to do. Again, we see this object labeled as Jupiter having a plasma ejection in these SRAM images, having a very long jet plasma ejection here, having a nova type outburst. And this is possibly due to the electrical connections that are being made in the inner solar system, in the sun's outer corona, which I have talked about in articles 77 and 78. And again, we see Venus seeming to have these ejections, and Jupiter, well, the object labeled Jupiter cannot actually be Jupiter, having some of its own ejections. There's again the nova outburst here looking black. And so this means that these objects cannot be what we are told they are, and this is just shows that these objects are indeed in the inner solar system. So in conclusion, HI1A and HI1A SRAM images from the end of March 2017 show evidence for the presence of at least three rejuvenated stellar cores in these images, which have been mislabeled in order to hide the presence of these objects in the inner solar system. This is Dr. Claudia Albers, Planet X physicist. Thank you for watching.